first of all, I have to introduce myself. I am Buddhika Samasekara. Actually, I am working as a chief engineer attached to the Sri Lankan Electricity Board, and I did my charter in 2002. And I did my MBA and postgraduate diploma as well. Okay. Here, the given topic is national policy and Sri Lankan economy. There are two parts, national policy and Sri Lankan economy. And I have given 2 lectures to conduct. We'll try our best to complete much as possible, because this is a huge area I have to cover, but I don't know whether I can cover all the things, but I will give you some other documents as well to go through. If you need any clarification, you can raise hand. Sorry. These are the outcomes expected by the IASL in this topic. I think everyone can hear me. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. First one is the potential for the development of Northeast and Southeast. I think by looking at these topics, you can assume what kind of questions IASL will ask to write down in your question in this particular B paper. Forms of government, concept of good governance, government economic policy, fiscal policy, what is growth, development of an economy, balance of payment, inflation, education, employment, unemployment, social harmony, peace initiatives, war and terrorism, major constraints in resolution, hegemony by developed countries, that means leaderships, energy policy, transportation policy, major infrastructure development projects in the pipeline and their objectives, justification and associated constraints, constitution, government structure, and proposed electoral reforms, bribery, corruption, political and other influence. I think this is a very huge, wide area they are expecting, but I am not doing every aspect, but I will try to cover most of the aspect. Then paper will be most probably, it's a general paper. No one will ask the definitions or what do you mean by unemployment or the employment. That kind of questions may not ask. It's a descriptive type, and you can write the answers by having your general knowledge and maybe the day-to-day economic activities by going through the news and the paper articles. Okay. And here, since this is 2 parts, national policy and Sri Lankan economy, first I will do the policies. Then after that, I will do the Sri Lankan economy. Okay. In our country, why we need the policy according to the national policy framework by this particular government, because I am not going through the historical policies or whatever the things. Now we are in 2021, maybe next 4 to 5 years, definitely this government will govern the country, because I am not biased on any political party or anything. I am giving independent views. These are the policies, actually these are the policies identified by the this particular government, but those are actually fundamental common policies carried out by the everyone, but having different aspects on that particular policies. Here, first one, they have considered it as a priority to the national security. I think that's the main concern about the government. That means priority to the national security, and they have mentioned how they achieve that national security, secure work environment, country free from drugs. I just want to know whether this particular presentation, whether ISL has shared among you before my lecture or not.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Then you, then it's easy to me. Okay. Then the other main thing, this government has identified the country free from drugs. That means that also they have considered as a priority item related to the national security. And second one is don't ask me whether these things are achieved or not, because I think all of you are matured people, you know what kind of achievement by the government. Okay, an efficient country free from corruption. That every government is telling that like that. They are telling how to achieve those things. That means an efficient governance mechanism, defeating corruption, state enterprises management policy. That is the, I think here, efficient governance mechanism, defeating corruption, those things. There are so many other legal framework, that means bribery acts and other things. State enterprises management policy means to, let's say if you go to some government institute, maybe RMV or some other organization, there are so many people, they want some bribes and other things, but here main objective is to have systems. That means maybe online systems or maybe some system to go through by the individual person without going behind the people. Then third one is the friendly non-aligned foreign policy. That's also from history onwards. Sri Lanka has mentioned as a non-aligned foreign policy. There are pros and cons on that one. That's the government policy. And the fourth one is the new constitution that fulfills the people's wishes. I think everyone know that this government is going to have a new constitution. Then the productive citizenry and vibrant human resource. That means they want to have key performance indicators, that kind of indicators. They want to go for appraisal systems and having the good human resource capital. Then people-centric economic development by having a macroeconomic targets, new tax policies. Cost, main objective of the government is to reduce the cost of living and to have more export crops than the conventional crops. That means their main in that key policy main objective is to enhance or empower the rural people. Then the seventh policy is technology-based society. Then I think that's main thing now every government is talking about. That means to get more and more foreign exchange into our country. Our main key directions they are going through is the global innovations hub, IT entrepreneurship, citizen-centric digital government. Then the development, it is the development of physical resources. That means whatever the resources within Sri Lanka, that means mineral, it could be a mineral resource, it may be some agricultural crops or whatever the things, those resources, then now we are talking about the mana, gas, maybe oil, other mineral sands, all those things to utilize maximum resources, and also the human, that because foreign employment opportunities, all the things under physical resources. Then ninth one is the sustainable environmental management. That environmental management covers everything, not only one thing, because it's mentioned as a sustainable environmental management. That means land management, industry management, waste management, biodiversity, settlement and cities, environmental and environmental education. I think now everyone is talking about we are going for a organic and inorganic fertilizer issue, then the renewable energy development, then the wildlife preservation, all those things under sustainable environmental management policy. And finally, they have mentioned discipline, law abiding and value-based society. I think those are the 10 main principles adopted by this particular government under their national policy framework. This could be, if you want to know about more, this could be downloaded through the national policy. If you just mention what is the national policy framework, you can go through every item in more detail. Okay, because here, since this is the topic is very vague, in any question, no one will ask what are the 10 national policy framework. Those kind of questions may not ask. No need to memorize anything, but you should read more on those things, and you may able to develop your own answers based on these policy concepts. And in addition to those, that means to support those 10 main national policy frameworks, they have identified the sector policies. That's the main thing. What are the key sectors they have identified? And these sector policies also not just developed by this government. Those are developed by historically by different governments. Now this particular government, they have actually identified more in detail in this particular sector policies. First one is the highest priority they have given is the education policy. That means they mention that is as no child is left behind. I think that's the term they use as education. And they encourage the free education system up to 13 years. That's the main policy target they are going through. If you want, you can go through the education policy in detail, but here I am not going in detail and no one will expect you to read all those things. But sector policy, what kind of sectors they have targeted, I think that's kind of thing you should know. Then the higher education they have targeted, enhancing the quality and relevance of the university education to produce professionally competent and capable graduate to meet socio-economic development in the country. I think now mainly they are talking about the socio-economic. That means sustainability concepts are adopted in every higher education curriculums. Then third one is the skill development and vocational trade. That also they have identified as a key sector policies, making every Sri Lankan skilled, enabling full employment in the global economy. That means the government has targeted, their main objective is to send skilled employees than that previously their main objective was to send the housemates. Now their main objective is to send the skilled employees. I think so many vocational training institutes now in these vocational training institutes, they have identified different levels. That means level 1, level 2 up to level 7. Once a person receive level 6, 7 competency, they can go become as some maybe a engineering level they have adopted in this kind of vocational training institute in different categories. Then the labor, protecting the rights of workers and achieve the healthy industrial relations in this context while enforcing existing laws and regulations. That means they have given a priority in the workforce also. Then the health sector, improving national health services, targeting a healthy nation with necessary institutional and policy reforms, and increase investment on health while recognizing the importance of coexistence of different forms of medicine and participation of private sector in health services. I think recently you may heard there are so many pharmaceuticals now they are developing, producing in Sri Lanka, and also they want to open more and more private sector participation on the health sector, those kind of things identified in the health sector policies. If I am doing fast, please let me inform, okay? Then the other one is the sports. Sports also, they have identified the key as a key policy. Then what kind of, their main objective is to have a healthy nation through the sports. Then also the non-communicable diseases. I think everyone knows now there are so many diseases we can recover through by doing the exercises or some kind of sports, and that kind of encouragement through the sports. Then the culture and heritage, that also they have identified creating a virtuous, responsible and anti-corrupt society through a promotion of a culture sensitive to heritage management, giving freedom for artistic work. Then the science, technology and research. That's the main idea. I think now you may know there are so many nanotechnology products developed in Sri Lanka. There are so many researchers going on that kind of encouragement through the science and technology researchers. Then other main thing is government has identified the information and communication technology. I think that in here also it is very clearly mentioned under 7 government key policy is the IT entrepreneurship and the citizen-centric digital government. That is the thing identified in here, information and communication technology. That means digitization of the Sri Lanka economy. That includes partnership with multiple stakeholders. There are so many items they are going through these policies. Then under agriculture sector, they have identified eco-friendly, innovative technologies will contribute to achieve inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Here, there are so many pros and cons on these policies, whether the government will achieve or not. It's a different issue, but here some positive aspect is now this government has identified what kind of policies. Now everyone is telling we are having very inconsistent policies. To overcome these inconsistent policies, we should develop what are the main key features of policies in individual sectors. But I think you know, with our political influences and our political systems, maybe a minister or maybe a president can influence on that one. But to develop a country in, I think in Western countries, most of the time they follow the consistent policies, whether it's independent by the government type of the government. That means they are having a well-written policies on the sectors. This government also tries to do that one, but we don't know what kind of achievement ultimately they can achieve on this. There are so many things. Just I will go through the main headings. Then the livestock they have identified. I think increasing production and quality of livestock products to satisfy the local demand and to boost rural income with objective of making our farmers capable to compete in local and international markets. Then the plantation sector, fisheries sector, they have identified the key sector policies. Then the land and land development they have identified. Then the industry sector they have identified. In here, industry sector, I think most important thing is they mention they will produce more highly value-added items than the normal conventional items, because our country, we are mainly depend on the import-oriented country. That means whatever the things we are importing, if we can export some finished good by adding more value that will give more foreign currency inflow to the country. That kind of policy they want to develop through the industry sector. Then the international trade and foreign investment, they are talking about the ensuring high trade performance and increase global integration by creating business-friendly regulatory and operational environmental while giving due consideration to the increased consumer welfare. Here, foreign investment, I think good examples are the port city, maybe the Hambantota harbor and other thing. Their main intention is to get foreign direct investments through these projects. To achieve those things, there are so many laws and other things they have to maybe relax, or maybe to linear, maybe to adopt new laws and regulations. Now, to govern the Colombo port city sector, they want to have a different act, those kind of things. Maybe some things may be contradictory to the present things, but to attract more and more foreign direct investment, they are targeting these policies. Then other thing is the tourism. They mentioned transforming Sri Lanka as the world's most treasured island for tourism. Then the land and transport, meeting the present and future passenger and good transport demand by ensuring quality, safety, and affordability with the widest possible mode mix and technological innovation in order to provide mobility requirements. I think here ISL also wants to give more significance on the transportation policy. The key aspects on the transportation sector policy I will explain in later. This energy sector policy and the transportation sector policy, ISL has given more significance than the other things. Maybe most of our engineers are involved on these aspects. Then the ports and shipping, making Sri Lanka the most competitive and preferred port and shipping destination in the region. Then the aviation also, they have identified transforming the country as the best air service provider to become one of the most popular tourist destinations in the region through a strong worldwide aviation network. Then the power and energy, ensuring energy security by diversification of energy sources and energy mix will be rationalized considering economic cost, environmental impacts, reliability of supplies, convenience to consumers, and strategic independence. Here, power and energy means not only the electricity and the petroleum resources also here in the power and energy. Energy means all the other things, power means electricity. Okay? And that also having established national energy policies published in year 2019. Actually, out of all these sector policies, at least 2 transportation and the national energy policies are somewhat established. Out of that, national energy policy is well established by 2019. That was gazetted by the during that previous government. National transportation policy still in the draft mode, but that has identified most of the issues and what kind of future we are leading to. Then the irrigation and water resource development, ensuring water availability to water users, providing water in adequate quantities with improved management, enhanced productivity, and water use efficiency while paying attention to spatial variation of water availability in the country. Then the water supply and sanitation, providing equitable access to safe drinking water and sanitation. I think that's one aspect now present government is proceed with. That means I think Prime Minister's office, they are having a different office to provide drinking water to everyone. That's the concept adopted by the present government. That's, I think, in their election manifestos also that was mentioned. Now it is identified as a policy as well. Then the housing and construction, because I am not reading all those things, housing and construction, urban development, judicial system, I think that's also a major item. Everyone is looking at major, that means when we want to get more and more foreign direct investment, most of the Western countries, they are looking for a transparent judicial system. That's the main thing. I think now whether we have achieved or not is a different story, but these are the things this government wants to proceed. Then the public management system, that's the mainly increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of the public service through empowering and motivating public servants and using modern technology and techniques, while ensuring accountability and transparency in the provision of the quality public service. Whatever the thing we have done up to now in the government sector, whether it's a failure or not, it's a different matter. But in country like Sri Lanka, definitely government sector plays a major role to get whatever, let's say if some private company wants to export or import whatever the product, they have to go through so many government sector organization. That means definitely government has to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the public service. Then the social integration, that's also a very important thing, rebuilding, reassuring, and re-establishing harmony in political, economic, and social spheres among the people, eliminating suspicion and distrust among communities in every corner of the country. I think that's the main important aspect. Without having proper social integration, country may not achieve any policy, because I think everyone knows we had a long war. During that time, everyone suffered. But now after the war, maybe country we are having this somewhat distrust, but every government, they want to build and reassure the harmony among the different social groups, social people, and their main objective is to work as a united country. That's under one policy. Then they have identified foreign affairs. That's the main thing. Up to now, Sri Lanka is considered as an unaligned country. That's in our foreign policy. They want to maintain that foreign policy as a non-aligned, free and progressive foreign policy. Then the main important thing is the environmental management. Facilitating robust economic growth through required investment while taking the measures to ensure the quality of environment will lead into the sustainable development. Because in here, normally the word we call as sustainable development means considering the overall approach. That means not only particular thing, like starting from the beginning to up to end, the process should be sustainable. Then the green development is the keyword of the environment policy, which embraces the pollution-free environment and a toxin-free food habit. Here I am not going to discuss about the pros and cons of the organic or inorganic fertilizer. That's a part that promoting organic fertilizer is a part of the environment management policy identified in one here. Then the social protection, implementing specific social protection schemes for all the necessary segment of the society to improve their living condition and empowering them to contribute to the development of the country. Then the regional development, then the regional potential, not only within the Sri Lanka. Now they want to go and develop Sri Lankan brand in different countries through this kind of policies. I think you know there are Sri Lankan companies having factories in Bangladesh, Middle East countries, and African countries, and they want to promote more and more that kind of development to promote these policies. And here now in the ISL outcome, they clearly mentioned we have to go through some key points of the national energy policy and the transportation policy. I will just go through the national energy policy. Here you can find the national energy policy full document. If you want, this full document is available. Here it was gazetted in 2019, August 9. That time, previous government some key points of the national energy policy and the transportation policy. I will just go through the national energy. At that time, our ministry was Ministry of Power, Energy and Business Development. What are the key things mentioned in the national energy policy? Here, main thing is this policy spells out ways and means of steering the energy sector. Here, please do not think this is only related to the this does not relate only to the power. This is the comprehensive energy policy. That means covering petroleum resources, energy, electricity, and every other energy resources. Renewable energy, everything, because I will go through one by one main pillars on the energy policy. Then you can identify what kind of key features on the national energy policy. The primary objective of the energy policy is to ensure energy security through suppliers that are cleaner, secure, economical, and reliable to provide convenient, affordable energy services. That means whatever the policy we adopted in here, our country's main objective is to provide at an affordable price. That's the main objective of the policy. Because if, let's say, if you go for 100% clean energy sources, then maybe price may not be affordable. Then we have to go for a good energy mix, that kind of thing. Because if I consider the power sector, some can say, okay, go with solar. Some say, no, we can go with only with wind. But we have to have a balanced system considering the cleaner aspect also we have to look at. Then the security aspect, then it should be economical and reliable. That means we have to maintain the stable power system. Then with the affordable prices. Based on that, we have to build up a proper energy mix. That also identified in the this energy sector policy. This energy sector policy developed on 10 pillars. That means mainly it has identified 10 items. We'll see one by one. First one is there are 10 pillars on that one. First one, I think that this may be a main significant point in your this national policy. First one is the assuring energy security. It mentioned primary and secondary energy supplies of the country will be secured to ensure continuity, adequacy, and reliability. That means first thing is to assure the energy security. Now, how to achieve the energy security is identified in detail in the national energy policy. At least you should know these particular 10 pillars. First, we will go through these 10 pillars. Okay. Then the providing access to the energy services. That means access to reliable, convenient, affordable, equitable, and quality energy services will be provided to all citizens to improve their living standards and to engage in gainful economic activities. Yeah, providing access to energy services means now, I think you may know, now we have achieved almost 100% electrification, almost 99%. Let's say we can say 100% electrification in Sri Lanka. But that does not mean every consumer get 100% quality supply. There are so many voltage dips. There may be continuous breakdowns. There are so many things. That means that does not mean we have achieved 100% quality. But everyone initially try to provide at least 100% electricity to the people. Now we are trying to achieve that quality by having more and more investment on the infrastructure, on the transmission network, distribution network. Same way, petroleum resources, then the gas supplies and other things. That's the second item is mentioned as providing access to the energy services. Then the third one is the providing energy services at the optimum cost to the national economy. That also identified as one pillar in the national energy policy. If this kind of thing not identified, then someone can say, okay, with solar we can do electricity, then we can run all the vehicles through electricity vehicles by charging solar. Those kind of extremes can exist if we don't identify this kind of things. That means optimum cost is the main objective, because that I mentioned, ultimate objective of the energy, whatever the policy, is to provide the reasonable price to the consumer. That is mentioned in the national energy policy. Then the fourth one is the improving energy efficiency and conservation. I think when you look at the electricity sector, this is previously we called it as the demand side management. That means previously we had the tungsten filament bulbs. Then CB and the maybe Lanka Electricity Company, then the government, they promote fluorescent lamps. Then after that, they promote LED lamps. Here, our main objective is to save the energy through improving the energy efficiency of the particular equipment. I think now vehicles also, you can see everyone is concerned about the fuel consumption of the vehicle, because everyone wants to buy a economical vehicle than having a vehicle consuming huge fuel consumption, because one is the affordability issue, and other one is that will impact on the government, and that has been identified in the national energy policy. And there are so many laws and so many restrictions imposed during the importation of this particular equipments. I think now you may know there are some ratings on the star ratings on the bulbs, then the star ratings on the refrigerators, star ratings on the lamps, then the star ratings on the air conditioning units. Like if it's a 5-star, that means it's a very good energy efficient equipment. I think if you want to buy a air conditioner or maybe a refrigerator, it should be a good thing. If first thing you should check whether what kind of star rating of that particular product. That star rating, now according to our country's law, those star ratings should be based on the product itself. That means that will give, if it's a 4-star product, that means it's give a more energy efficiency product than the 3-star product. That kind of product identification has been developed mainly on the electric items, electrical equipment, other things, other energy related equipments also they want to develop. Then the number 5 is the enhanced self-reliance. That means whatever our energy requirement, we have to develop optimum level through our country itself. That means here main target is to develop the indigenous energy resources. This indigenous means whatever the resource within the country. That's why every government wants to find out this oil exploration, this gas exploration, then the development of renewable energy, all these under enhancing self-reliance. That is identified as a one pillar. Then the number 6 is the caring for the environment. That means whatever the project now we have to develop, that should be a low carbon intensity projects, and through the energy sector project itself, government wants to develop and minimize the adverse effect on the environment that is identified in the national energy policy. That's why Sri Lanka now going for the liquefied natural gas. That means it's a cleaner fuel. Then if Sri Lanka get the liquefied natural gas, then that can be developed as a compressed natural gas. That means CNG, maybe vehicles can run, maybe the industries can use CNG instead of the furnace oil. Just imagine if you can convert all these power stations, Kalinitissa power stations, all thermal power stations into natural gas, definitely that will reduce the present emission levels drastically. That is now already adopted. That means the government has taken a decision to go ahead with the natural gas, introduction of natural gas into the Sri Lankan power sector. Not only the power sector, once it adopted in the power sector, automatically main industries, they will switch into the compressed natural gas. That could be, and maybe these Colombo city apartments, all the things, they can go with the CNG network as well, instead of the LPG. Then the number 7, enhancing the share of renewable energy. Here, this energy sector, I think if you go through the number 5, it's mentioned enhancing self-reliance. Indigenous energy resources has been mentioned here, but special attention they have given for the renewable energy sources, enhancing the share of renewable energy. I think now everyone may know that government wants to go for a 70% renewable energy in the power sector. Whether it's achievable or maybe there are technical concerns, whatever barriers may be there, but that's the government policy. That has been now identified as a government policy. Let's say if it may not be possible to achieve 70% by 2030, but maybe that kind of target will help to boost the renewable energy sector in Sri Lanka. Previously, they have identified 20% of renewable energy in 2020. I think that was achieved by the power sector sector by 2020 itself. Now they have enhanced that 20% criteria to 70%, but 70% considering all the energy. Previously 20% they have excluded the major hydros through the wind, mini hydros, solar, that kind of sources. They have identified 20%, but 70% they have included all the major hydros. But definitely we know that because since I am also from CEB, we may definitely achieve 70% through the clean energy sources once we adopt the LNG into the power sector. But definitely we may able to achieve more than 50-55% through the renewable energy sources. But if the government invests more on the other infrastructure development, particularly on the transmission and distribution networks, definitely 70% through renewable energy may be a possible task, but time may 2030 may be the issue, maybe 2035, 2040, that kind of target. Sri Lanka can achieve that kind of target, but whatever the positive thing is, now government has mentioned that as a policy. Then they mention strengthening the good governance in the energy sector. Governance of the energy sector to be strengthened to realize accountability, fairness, and transparency to achieve the investor and consumer confidence. A stable policy environment will be ensured, and the regulatory framework will be further strengthened to assure the good governance in the energy sector. Have you heard about this new fortress energy agreement and other things? Is anyone knows about this? You can talk, there is no issue. Hello. That's the other thing, because here it's mentioned as we have to strengthen the good governance in the energy sector. We mentioned it should be a fairness, transparency to achieve investor and consumer confidence. But this there are some tenders float on this particular project, but government wants to go with the new fortress energy. Then the question is whether this transparency concept adopted in the national energy policy is looking after by the government itself. That kind of thing is there, but I am not talking about whether government is doing right or wrong. This kind of policy, let's say that now still this is very new policy, 2019. There are different pressure groups on these particular projects, but at least energy sector having this kind of 10 pillars identified in the national energy policy. Then other thing is securing land for future energy infrastructure. I think you know now Sri Lanka, we are having only few locations we can develop future power plants. Let's say Mana, we can develop wind, solar, Punari maybe solar, wind. Then the Trincomalee, Sampur maybe a thermal power development, Hambantota maybe thermal power development. Some parts in the Kerala Pitiya, those particular lands, maybe let's say if we want to develop Trincomalee by 2025 or 2030, now itself we should able to acquire those lands. Otherwise, if we want to acquire those lands by 2025, 2028, those lands may not be available. Because of that, this national energy policy identified one major item, securing the land now itself, not only for the power plants, as well as the for the transmission network towers. Then also maybe let's say if we want to develop a LNG infrastructure in Colombo, then transport the gas to the southern part, maybe to the northern part of the Sri Lanka, we may have to do a pipeline networks and other things. For those kind of things, we have to acquire the lands and other boundaries. Those things, through this national energy policy, if that particular institute wants to acquire, that kind of provision is available in that. Then number 10 is the providing opportunities for innovation and entrepreneurship. Because since here we are mainly talking about to enhance more and more renewable energy there could be so many Sri Lankan entrepreneurship. They will do this kind of business. There are new innovations. Those things should be encouraged through the national energy policy itself. That is also identified. Here, one question. One participant has asked 70% renewable by when? Okay, actually the government has published we should achieve 70% by 2030. That's the government target. Previously, government had a target 20%. Actually, not the renewable energy. Previously, it called as an unconventional renewable energy by 2020. That was achieved by the power sector. With the hydro sources, it was more than 50%. Now here it mentioned as the 70%. I think everyone must know that by increasing demand, now we may not have more and more hydropower power plants to develop. That means we have to develop more solar, more wind, maybe mini hydros, maybe biomass, maybe different types of solar with battery, whatever the things. Our main focus in future is the solar and wind, and that's the government target given on that one. Now, power sector has to follow that target. We'll see what kind of achievement. I think previously also CB made a plan to achieve around 60%, but government wants 70%. Now they have changed their plans. Change their plan. CB has changed their plans to focus on the 70% target. It's not an easy target. There are so many technical barriers. I think if you know, if we want to develop a wind park or solar park in dry zone area, let's say Mana, CB has to go through a 2-year bird counting program to get the environmental clearance. There are so many environmental concerns we have to look into when developing this kind of renewable energy project as well. Don't think renewable energy project can develop without doing any environmental impact assessment. There are so many things. It takes time, but at least by 2030 to achieve, let's say, at least 50 to 60 target, now itself, government has to, not the government, actually, country has to start those projects. And can you brief this new fortress issue regarding LNG if time permits? Okay, I'll discuss more because since I have 2 days, we'll try to focus on the national energy policy things today, and next time we'll do the Sri Lankan economy. There is no issue. This LNG new fortress energy issue regarding LNG. I think you know this LNG. LNG means liquefied natural gas. It's a natural gas, not the LPG, petroleum gas. Now, power sector, we have identified all our new thermal development, new thermal power plant should be use liquefied natural gas. Let's say forget about the liquefied gas, natural gas. liquefaction needs only for the transportation. Once the natural gas extracted from the ground, it will compress and liquefy for the transportation purposes. That means LNG means that its temperature is minus 160 Celsius, minus 160 Celsius. During the transportation, we have to maintain that minus 160 Celsius temperature. Then it should be unloaded into our own storage facility. Then we have to regasify. That means to utilize the LNG, again, we have to regasify it as a natural gas. That's the natural gas process if we don't have the natural gas. In our country, let's say if we have a natural gas in Mana Basin, we can directly use the natural gas through a pipeline to our plants. Without that means that does not involve any liquefaction. Liquefaction needs only for the transportation for the longer period. Now, mainly in European countries, they have pipeline network for the natural gas. This Russia, all the Russian Federation previous countries, they are the main natural gas suppliers to the European countries. They have just a pipeline network. Since CB wants to introduce LNG into our power plants, we call for some tenders, international bids. Then the international bids to have the infrastructure. Infrastructure means to store the liquefied natural gas, regasify the liquefied natural gas into the gas. Then once the regasified, it will come through the pipeline and the pipeline network to the power plants, and power plants will consume the gas. That's the process in the infrastructure. That means infrastructure needs some LNG storage, regasification, and the pipeline. That's the project CB called for a tenders. During that tender, I think there are about 20 companies. They have taken the tender documents. Then this USA company called New Fortress Energy, they gave an unsolicited proposal direct to the government. Not only the infrastructure, they want to bring the LNG also into the country. That's the proposal by them. Then government, since it came through the USA embassy and the that geopolitics came into that picture, then the government wants to evaluate that proposal, and suddenly government signed the agreements and other things. Because I am not going through the in-depth of analysis on that one, because there are some trade union actions going in our CB also regarding this process, because that's our main concern. Is it's since there is a tender float on the same projects, why government government wants to consider this unsolicited proposal. That's the main concern on that one. That means another thing is, now I think if we go for this petroleum sources, we are having a refinery. We are calling tenders to bring the crude oil time to time. That means we don't have a fixed contract to bring the crude oil into the Sri Lanka. That's that kind of same policy we want to adopt for the natural gas also. That means we want to build the infrastructure, and based on our requirement, Sri Lankan government can call LNG tenders time to time. Then depends on the price, maybe the spot market price or maybe a fixed some price, we can bring the LNG time to time. But in these NFE proposals, they inbuild all three aspects. That means infrastructure means floating storage, regasification, pipeline, and the gas supply. That means for that particular period of time, Sri Lanka has to buy the gas only through the New Fortress Energy Company. That's the concern raised by the energy sector community. One thing is the transparency of the tender. Since the international tender is flawed, why government entertain an unsolicited proposal? Then second is to differentiate the infrastructure and the gas supply from the particular tender, since it's like a hedging for the next 5 years. I think that I explained, because I am not going in detail about that, because there are so many other concerns on the New Fortress Energy concerns. Another thing is it possible to create a nuclear power plant in SL? I saw some plants in Japan in slightly urbanized areas. Can't be built with the support of China, India, or USA? Actually, CB, we did a initial feasibility study on the nuclear power plant. That means it's like exploring the possibility of developing the nuclear power plant. A major concern is the size, capacity. Normally, nuclear power plants having more than 600,000 megawatt power single unit capacity. But our system is still small. We are having around 4,000 megawatt capacity. Maybe next 10 years, 2030, it will increase about the 7,000 megawatt. Whether the single unit capacity will be economical to Sri Lanka, that's a major concern in our sector, because now itself, let's say our maximum capacity is 300 megawatt power plant in Norachole. I think you know, if sudden fail, maybe a breakdown or maybe a tripping of the coal power plants, it's a 300 into 3 units, that means 900 megawatt. It's feed through to Colombo through the Norachole to Wayango, the transmission line. If sudden failure in the transmission line, that means 900 megawatt will be out from the system. Then that suddenly 900 megawatt may not be a sudden outage of the 900 megawatt may impact on the stability of the system. That will be a huge impact if we adopt a 1,000 megawatt nuclear power plant into Sri Lanka. That's since it's a small, our system is small, there are capacity limitation. Because of that, our intention was to introduce nuclear by after 2020. But there are so many other criteria we have to look into, whether the suitable location, so many things are there. Those things are under feasibility, initial feasibility studies. But it's like another main thing is government consistent decision should be there. Let's say it's a huge commitment on the cost. Inconsistent with this kind of inconsistent government policies, no one can build a nuclear plant or at least coal plant in Sri Lanka. Another thing is there any possibility of purchasing power from India from the nearest Other here, there is a study to interconnect Sri Lankan power system with the Indian system. It's like a DC system, 1,000 megawatt DC system. Almost we have done the initial feasibility studies and everything. Now, if the two governments give the clearance, that kind of project can go ahead. I think that's a very good suggestion. But that does not mean we are buying the power from the nuclear power plants. Sri Lankan government, normally in our sector, I think you know, transmission licensee, he is the licensee buying power. We have to buy the power from the Indian power sector, that means it's called the power grid, like CB in India, it's called the Power Grid India. We have to sign an agreement with the power grid at the 400 kV level. That 400 kV level, once we sign the agreement, we don't know whether we are buying the power from nuclear plant or maybe a coal plant or maybe a renewable energy power plant. But maybe we are not signing the agreement with a particular power plant. Once we establish this interconnection, two governments, that means actually maybe transmission licensee of the Sri Lankan Electricity Board has to sign the power purchase agreement with the power grid of India at 400 kV level. Then whatever the 400 kV network in their power network, maybe majority of the power from the nuclear power plant and the coal power plants, then we can purchase. Okay, we may not be able to obtain the power from the particular power plant. Okay, then shall we go through the other policy? This is just the view of the national energy policy. Here, three main aspects are there. One is the energy security, energy equity, energy sustainability. You can see first one, assuring energy security. Second one, providing access to the energy services and secure land for future energy infrastructure. It's defined under energy equity. Then the number 3, 4, 5, and 10 defined under energy security. And number 6, 7, and 8 under energy sustainability. Those are the 10 main pillars identified under these three frameworks that we can call it as a policy framework: energy security, energy equity, energy sustainability. If you want to read more, you can download this you can easily download this gazette. This is the gazette. Just mention national energy policy of Sri Lanka, then you can download this gazette. It's somewhat around 10 to 15 pages are there. You can go through in details, but I think whatever the thing I am highlighted on this particular thing will be sufficient to write some descriptive answer by adding more things from your side itself. It's like 27 pages are there in this particular gazette. Okay. Then shall we do the other one? National Transportation Policy. What are the main things identified? What are the main objective of this particular policy? Here, main thing is they want to develop an efficient economic transportation system is vital to sustain and enhance the economic development and quality of life of the country. When you read the national energy policy and the transportation policy, common objectives are same. Then other detailed objectives depend on related matter. Okay. The transport sector contributes to the economic development in Sri Lanka in different manners, such as networking the relationships between the consumers and producers, improving the performance by reducing the cost and time of traveling. I think that's the most important thing. Increasing reliability and improving the productivity by increasing the access to diverse groups of inputs and broader market to output. We'll see what are the objectives in the transportation policy. There are several objectives identified in the this is a draft transportation policy. It was not gazette like national energy policy. demonstrate the need of transport infrastructure and services to be efficient and be in line with the development goals of the national, provincial and rural level in Sri Lanka. Provide necessary guidance to stakeholders in the transportation sector to improve transport systems to achieve strategic objectives and priorities of the government. Guide on the necessary investment priorities for achieving the expected outcomes in the transportation sector. Provide platform to enhance the efficiency in long-term decision-making regarding the infrastructure improvement and service management in transportation sector. We'll see what are the policy principles. Like previously in national energy policy, there are 10 pillars. Here also there are some policy principles identified in the national transportation policy. First one is the accessible transport system. Here, our previous energy policy also it mentioned access to the energy. Here also it's mentioned as accessible transport system. Transport systems are designed to meet the basic transport needs of citizens and business and promote effective and efficient integration of all transport systems to complement each other using new technologies and related development. Transport services should be easily accessible to all users. That's the first thing they have identified as the key policy principle. Then the energy efficiency and environmental protections. I think in the energy policy also it's mentioned energy efficiency and the that means like demand side management, energy efficiency and conservation. Here also it's mentioned as the environmental concerns. All modes of transportation should be guided towards an efficient and cost-saving energy policy. That here the energy means every transport mode needs, most of the transport modes needs the fuel. That means ultimate objective to achieve the cost saving of in the energy. Then the transport services to be provided in sustainable manner with minimum environmental disruption. I think if you want to go through and see what would be the most pollutant agents, that means most pollutant parameters in our country, mainly the carbon monoxide is the main parameter. That means mainly emit through the vehicle emissions. Let's say that's why I told if we can switch the fuel into electricity or other clean energy source, we can reduce the emissions drastically. Now, I think there were studies to convert the railway into the electrification. I think it's a Pandura up to Veyangoda. That study was there. Then main objective was to reduce the emissions of the trains through that particular railway line. I think if we can adopt that kind of electric trains, that will be a huge advantage to reduce the emissions. Then also there are matters related to the three-wheeler and these taxi services. Once the introduction of natural gas into Sri Lanka, they can convert all these taxis and hired vehicles into the compressed natural gas. I think you may heard about the Indian Delhi city. They requested all the taxis to be converted to the natural gas. Maybe their instruction was very strict. They requested give a very short time duration and requested all taxis to be converted into the CNG to reduce the environmental emission. But still, you can hear Delhi having a huge emission issue. There are industrial emissions and the transport emission that we have to differentiate, but main importance of the reduction of the transport emission is it will be at your nose level. That's the main thing. Most of the industrial emissions at the higher stack level, that is, we can't say it's not a justifiable thing, but it is important to reduce the transportation emissions, mainly that will impact on your health drastically than the environmental emission. CNG means compressed natural gas. Okay, not compressed natural gas. Okay. Normally natural gas, to burn the natural gas, you may need some other additional technical devices. Because of that, okay, power plant can adopt that kind of thing, but for a vehicle and maybe in the, let's say in your LPG also, that cylinder having some pressure on that one. Natural gas at normal pressure, you can't ignite. Because of that, you have to compress the natural gas. Okay. For the power plant case, no need to compress the natural gas because it can accommodate the different techniques to ignite the natural gas. But for a vehicle and maybe for a small domestic use, our cooking purposes, we may have to have a compressed natural gas. It's not like a very high compressive ratio. I can't remember the ratios, that kind of thing, but you have to compress the natural gas. Then the increased safety and security, transport services to be safe, comfortable and reliable, provide safe environment for women, children, elderly and differently able people in designing the transport infrastructure. I think very good example is the day before yesterday ferry disaster. I think all these things violated in that particular case. Transport services to be safe was not there, comfortable was not there, because I think there are more than 40 people travel on that ferry. That means provide safe environment for women, children, elder. I think school children, ladies, elderly people. I think out of that 40, you can see all were in that particular group. There are, I think, 2 or 3 school children died. Then the women, maybe elderly. Then there are some rescued people also. So many concerns were there. That means that's the main thing in the national transport policy. Then the positive contribution to the economy. I think that's the main objective of whatever the policy. We should develop a policy aiming to contribute positively to the economy. It should not be a negative impact on the economy. That means once we adopt the policy, if it creates a disharmony among the people, or people are fighting on that policy or objecting on that policy, then you have to rethink about the policy. I think that's a good example is this organic fertilizer case. When we introduce that kind of policy, whether we have adequately study or not, that kind of thing is there. Here it's clearly mentioned, improve the efficiency and quality of the transport services at a reasonable cost that adequately meet existing and potential demand of the movement of passengers and goods. We can adopt, if someone can say we will bring AC buses for every mode of transport, then that may be a good idea, but whether that will achieve a reasonable cost to a people. Then if not, people will object on that one. and that may not be positively contribute to the economy. That all these, because maybe private sector, if we, another thing is, let's say if we want to privatize all these transport modes, whether that will positively contribute to the economy or not. That kind of thing you have to think when we are developing this kind of policy. I think policy itself, they have identified all the things. Our main issue is how we try to implement these policies. I think energy sector policy also, all the things were very clearly identified, but whatever the government or maybe a institute which adopt those criteria, whether they are adopting it correctly or not, that's the issue. But at least first thing, we should have a proper policy and it should be consistent. That's the other main thing. If whatever the policy, if the person to person, if he wants to define the terms, then it's not a good policy. Then the integration of land use and transport planning. Here also the same thing, like secure the lands in the infrastructure of the energy sector. We have to integrate land use development and transport system development so that travel distances are minimized and access to livelihood, education, and other social needs of the population is improved with the help of new transport and non-transport intervention, new technologies, and related strategies. I think that's a good thing when we are planning the transport. I think best example is this multimodal transport system in Mabima Homagama. They have developed a common place. We can go and park the vehicle. Then there are city buses. I think it may not function 100% as it is, but that's the concept under this policy principle. Oh, wait. Then what are the policies? Now, those are the policies we talk about. Then what are the national policy goals they want to achieve through this national transportation policy? First thing is to promote the efficient movement of the people and goods in order to support sustainable economic development. Here, just don't think when we are developing a transportation system, we have to think only about the people. That means we have to consider the goods transportation as well. Now, and also the every mode of the transport system. That means vehicle transportation, train transportation, then the inland other methods, maybe inland flights, maybe boat or ferry services, everything we have to look in under this policy. Then the promotes social inclusion to allow equitable access to all. That means access is the main other important thing. Then the provide the safe transport system that minimizes damages, injuries, and loss of lives. Then other thing is to protect the environment sustainability and improve health. Improve health means the reduction of the emissions. That's the main thing we have to think about. That means in this transportation policy also, they mention they have transport modes should switch into a cleaner energy sources. That cleaner energy sources, then that will govern through the national energy policy. Okay. That's the main items I want to discuss under national policies. here I focus mainly on the national energy policy and the national transportation policy. And there are so many items identified in the national energy policy and the transportation policy. All the identified items are very good and very comprehensive, but main issue is the implementation issues and the inconsistencies of the government. And our thing is, whatever the present government is doing something, then the next government will change that thing. But these policies should not be changed by government to government. Only implementation priorities may be changed, but the concepts may not be changed. Do you have any other questions? Because then I can start the national economy as well. Because there are so many things I have to discuss. At least it's better if I start the national economy and some basic theoretical things, then I can continue for the next day. Shall we start, or do you need any break or something? Please tell me. Since maybe you have come from the officers and other things, if you want, we can have some 5 to 10 minutes break and go. I don't know whether what is the, okay, we'll start. Okay, no problem. So there is any policy to develop or bring new technology of transport. Okay, actually, in the transport policy, when we are developing any policy, not only the transportation policy, energy sector policy, we are not defining the modes. That's a thing. It's mentioned as an efficient movement, or new technologies should be adopted like that. In the policy itself, we are not mentioning. Now, let's say in the renewable, in the national energy policy, it mentioned enhance the renewable energy development in the Sri Lanka. But that does not mention these are the renewable energy modes we have to develop. That means wind, solar, maybe wave energy, tidal energy, all the things, whatever the new technology appropriate to and cost effective to that particular country, we can adopt that one. In a policy, no one will identify. Let's say in this particular thing, it's mentioned as a new technology for transport. That technology is not mentioned, but that gives the provision to adopt any technology, whether it's economical and appropriate for that particular country. Normally, every policy, once the policy is developed, that particular institutes, they have to develop the actions. In those actions, they can identify these are the actions we will develop to achieve that particular policy element of the main policy. What is the most economical and environmental friendly energy suitable for Sri Lanka for in future to cater to the demand? Yeah. Here now our main objective is for going for actually, okay, there could be some pros and cons when we define a word called renewable energy targets. Let's say 70% renewable energy target. It may be a good thing. Definitely, at least we can achieve some part, but I think, in my personal opinion, is if we can achieve 70% clean energy sources, that means definitely majority through the renewable energy sources, then definitely we will have some clean energy source like liquefied natural gas. But if someone can say natural gas also emit emissions, okay, but not compared with the diesel or the furnace oil or the coal. When you compare with that kind of fuel, natural gas emissions are very low. CO2 emissions are half, no sulfur dioxide, no NOx, no particulate emissions. Then when you compare it with the coal, diesel, furnace oil, natural gas is a cleaner fossil fuel. It's a cleaner fossil fuel. When you consider the solar and wind, okay, those are 100% clean energy sources. During the production of energy, there may not be any impact on the environment because it's not emit anything. But when you look at the development of the solar park or the wind park, let's say now for a thermal power plant factor may be 80%. Solar park maybe solar plant, maybe plant factor maybe 17%. Wind park maybe plant factor maybe 30, let's say 35%. Now let's say when you just compare the energy to energy, let's say 100 megawatt solar park at 17% plant factor and 100 megawatt thermal power plant, let's say LNG operated power plant at 80% plant factor. That means to have the same energy, you need at least 500 megawatt solar park. To develop a 500 megawatt solar park, you may need at least 2,000 acres, 2,500 acres of the land. But for to develop the 100 megawatt LNG power plant, you may need maybe 10 to 15 acres of land. Then, if you look at the land conservation, maybe then the to develop a solar park, we may have to find the location in north or eastern part of the Sri Lanka. Then mostly our scrub jungles we have to clear. Let's say maybe you need to clear 2,000, 2,500 acres of land to develop a 500 megawatt park. That will impact on the biodiversity aspect of the country. That's why in the energy policy itself, it's mentioned it should be economical and reliable, and it should have a proper mix on that one. Let's say if we can develop a 100 megawatt LNG plant and plus maybe not the 500 megawatt, maybe around 100 to 200 megawatt solar park, it may be a better mix and better contribution to the environmental aspects as well. That means you can't have clear definition. This is the most economical and environmental friendly energy production facility power plant in Sri Lanka. That kind of firm decision you can't see, you can't define. The best thing is to have a proper mix on that one. That means we have to look into the pros and cons of everything. But if it therefore that our energy policy itself, it developed for a balanced energy mix. But how about the disposal of those solar energy parks after aging of panels? Does government or the utility have such plans? Yes. What about that environmental impact assessment? Okay. I think that's a very good question. Now we are talking about development of huge solar parks in our country. I think everywhere in the world, still they are mainly concerned about the implementation of the solar parks. They are not still concerned about the disposing of the solar panels, as that issue may arise maybe after 20 to 25 years time. But that question we also raise from the solar panel developers. They are telling that kind of processes are under preparation and they will go through the recycling processes of the solar panels that can use in future in everywhere in the world. but there are no such commercially operated recycling plants up to now. Okay, that's a very good question, but no one is talking about that aspect. Still, everyone is talking about the implementation of solar panels, thinking during the power generation, that would be a cleaner source. Cabinet approval has been granted for the establishment of the National Petroleum and Gas Company. Is this related for the... No, actually, this National Petroleum and Gas Company, okay, government intention may be Sri Lankan Mana Basin gas. That's their national petroleum. Their main concern to have the National Petroleum and Gas Company to develop our own gas resources. That's the main objective. Maybe they may use that particular company to bring the LNG into the Sri Lanka. Up to now, and that's other concern. Our Sri Lankan laws, LNG is not defined as a fuel source in our sector. That means petroleum resources, they define diesel, petrol, naphtha, furnace oil, all the things. Those two should be bring by Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. Coal, we are bringing through the Lanka Coal Company, established under different act. Same way, Sri Lanka has to develop an act to bring the LNG. Maybe government intention is to include that to that particular National Petroleum and Gas Company. That's definitely government has to be implement a new mechanism. They may want to implement through that particular National Petroleum and Gas Company, but initially they mentioned they formed that particular company to develop the Mana Basin gas. Is there any possibility to adopt nanotechnology for power generation? Up to now, we didn't have any proven concept identified for a large-scale power generation plants. Maybe if they develop, we could adopt. Up to now, because we are talking about large-scale power plants. I am not talking about the small-scale thing, because since we want to connect to the national grid, at least we have to talk about 100 megawatt, more than 100 megawatt. Okay, maybe 10 megawatt level we are accommodating. Up to now, this kind of nanotechnology concepts are not adopted as a proven technology up to now. Are there any questions? Solar is a very adverse environmental impact on aquatic ecosystems. So should we prepare to apply new policy to the reservoirs in dry zone? Very adverse. Solar is very... Yeah. Actually, due to the land limitations, now so many proposals are coming to develop as floating solar projects. I don't know whether this question is related to that or not. There are pros and cons of the floating solar, but there are so many proposals. They want to implement all these dry zone tanks and the Mahaveli River tanks, these floating solar power plants. Up to now, I think we didn't give any clearance up to now due to the EIA and other concerns. I don't know whether I don't know whether this question is clear to me. Solar is very adverse environmental impact on aquatic ecosystem. So should we prepare to apply new policy to reservoirs in dry zone? My other under the Surya consent on promoting rooftop missile, but it might create fluctuation in the main grid the way it policy could be. Yeah, actually, definitely large scale solar projects are more comfortable to the network, but domestic solar, rooftop solar also we can accommodate up to a certain limit. There are some limitations imposed by the CB itself. That means 80% of the transformer capacity we are presently adopting. Let's say if we are having 100 kVA transformer, up to 80 kVA solar connections, we are giving permission to connect to that particular transformer. That kind of grid limitation factors are there. What will happen to the non-renewable power plant with this 70% renewable energy concept? No, it will be there. Okay. Normally, whatever the power plant is there. Let's say normally power plants, I am not going in detail on the dispatching mechanism. Whatever the mechanism, CB has to use the economic dispatch. And also we have to maintain the base load power plants. That means stability of the system. Based on that, CB will dispatch the power plants. Let's say 70% renewable energy is there, but definitely there are other technical concerns, the system inertia, system reliability, so many other things. Then the backup systems, all the things. Thermal power plants will be not as a base load power plants, then maybe it could be a backup standby options. Maybe plant factors of the thermal power plants may reduce. Definitely, everyone wants to go for a 70% renewable energy. Okay, maybe it is very easy to write all these things in the paper, but when you want to develop the power plant on ground, it will take more and a lot of lead time. Now, just I mentioned Mana 100 megawatt wind park. I think it was started in 2016, but the EIA process started before that. For the EIA itself, it took more than 3 years. There are so many concerns when we are developing a large scale renewable energy power plant. Those things we have to look into that. The work through. No, I think that's the main thing. Now, let's say if the government is firmly defined the 70% renewable energy target, future thermal plant development, definitely we have to reduce the capacity. That means reduce capacity means when you look at our plan prepared in, let's say 2015, there may be 3,000, 4,000 megawatt thermal power plants proposed in the CB long-term generation plan. Now it may be reduced for around 1,000 megawatt and increase the solar and wind capacities. Previously, maybe 2030, it may be around 1,000 megawatt. Now it may be around 4,000 megawatt. Okay, energy-wise, you can see that you should not just compare the energy to energy. You have to look into as a holistic approach of the power system. There are so many other things you have to consider when you are doing a planning and when you are dispatching the power from the system control center. So many other technical things you have to look into that. For that, definitely you need the mix of different power plants. Because when you look at the inertia and other thing concerns, we need the thermal power plants as well. Maybe someone can say you can use battery. Okay, maybe someday we may go for that kind of system, but it may not be a very near future. Hope it's clear. Any other questions? Shall we start the other part? I can't see any messages.
Yes, sir.
Then shall we start?
Yes,
Okay. Okay, wait some questions. Yes. Okay, we start. Okay, this is the Sri Lankan economy. Here, maybe you should know all these terms in day-to-day life. Here, since all of us are engineers, I am also an engineer. Because of that, I will go through some small definitions as well. Whatever the term, if you can't understand, please let me inform. But don't think in detail about these terms, because we are not the economists. We want to just to know about the Sri Lankan economy and what kind of directions we have to go forward to recover the economy, and what kind of contribution as an engineer you can do for the economy. That's the main thing here. Our objective is not to learn the economic principles and the theories of economy. Okay, one is the inflation. This is the snapshot. I think that this was around September 30th 2021. Our inflation here, it's mentioned as September 2021. It's around 6.2. Maybe now, I think yesterday's news I heard it's around 8.5. That means almost September to November, around 2 months, our inflation has increased around more than 2%. That means another 2%. It's a huge increase. I think everyone can feel that inflation when you go to do shopping and buy day-to-day products. And our area is there. Our economic growth. Okay, these are central bank statistics. We don't know whether it's 100% correct or not, but those are the public statistics. Okay, it mentioned economic growth is 12.3%. Then indicative LKR price is 202. This NCPI means National Consumer Price Index. That's the basket we are. Hello. That's the concept we adopt to calculate the inflation. This SDFR means standing deposit facility rate and standing lending facility rate that will govern the interest rates. I think, don't think about these words. Now everyone knows whatever the fixed deposit, what kind of interest rate they are giving for the fixed deposit. I think now it's very low interest rate. Why that low interest rate? Central bank, our economy itself, it defines these are the rates we can give maximum. That means standing deposit facility rate, it's around 5%. That means all our that's true. Economic growth value is not aligned with the inflation or interest rate. Yeah, that's true. That's why I told this is the snapshot in the central bank report. Maybe they calculated for maybe based on Q1. I think that's why it's mentioned. This is not Q1 to Q2, maybe. Okay. don't think all these values are reliable. There are so many things in the central bank reports. Those are questionable things. Okay. Then the interest rate, you can see treasury bill interest rate is also very low. Previously, it was, they have given the treasury bills more than 10 to 11%. And when they offer more than 10% treasury bill interest rates, we also got the FD rates more than 12, 13, 14, 15. Now we are getting very low interest rates on our deposits. During the inflationary time, government may try to, they don't have money, they can't invest on high interest rate things, projects. Therefore, definitely, the economic principle itself reduce the interest rates. Then our unemployment rate also around 5.1. Our population is 21.9. Still, our per capita is US dollars 3,682. That per capita income is almost stable during last years. Okay, these are the economic terms I want to introduce. Please try to go through, just learn about these economic terms, because I will use those terms during my next day session. That's why I just want to introduce these terms. One is the aggregate demand. Aggregate demand consists of, there are 4 values. It calls C plus I plus G plus NX. Okay. C is called the consumer spending on goods and services. That means consumer spending, whatever the expenditure, we focus on the goods and services. Total, this is aggregate, means total country we are talking about. Then I means private investment and corporate spending on non-final capital. Don't consider this non-final other things. It may consider as all the investment. Just think all the investments. C means all the consumer spendings. Here they mention I means private investments. G means government spending. Okay, government spending, that means aggregate demand means C, all the consumer expenditure, all the private investment, all the government spendings, plus net exports. Net exports means this could be plus value or minus value. Okay, just this mentioned as NX means net exports, exports minus import. But let's say in our country, if the imports more than export, then this value would be minus. Okay, this term we want to know, this aggregate demand function. No need to memorize this function, but how do we apply these terms into the Sri Lankan economy? That's the other things. Normally our system, NX is a minus value. Our imports are higher than the exports. Okay. Sometimes our whole thing having a maybe a minus value. Okay. Then countries in a very terrible situation. We'll go those kind of things in later. Just think how this aggregate demand is defined. Okay. Then other term is, because since I am using all these terms in different aspects, GDP. That's the normal word we are using. It's mentioned gross domestic product. Total market value of the all final goods and services produced within the country. That means total market value of all final goods and services produced within the country will define the gross national product. Then you can see the difference. Okay. One is called GDP, other one is called GNP. Okay. GNP is output produced by country's citizens. That means total market value produced by the country's citizens. In Sri Lanka, there are our own citizens, that means Sri Lankan citizens, as well as the foreign citizens working in different projects. Maybe they contribute lot of things there. GDP means that total amount produced within the country. GNP is that value produced by only the country's citizens. But most of the time in the economic terms, we consider the GDP instead of GNP. Normally GDP is higher than the GNP because GDP, when you look at the GDP, it covers all the goods and services. But GNP, goods and services produced only by the country's citizens. That's the difference between the GDP and GNP. Then, when you read the economic terms, there are two values you can see, nominal values and real values. Nominal values means based on current dollar terms. That means now, let's say today dollar may be 210. Based on today's value, whatever the thing, if you define that, that is called the nominal value. But real value is, let's say now our base year maybe 2010 or 2015. Now sometimes base year dollar value maybe, let's say 150. Then real value will be determined. It's like a present value case. There is a base year value and the base year base that will be adjusted for the base year. And actually this inflation, let's say now previous slide, we can see the inflation as, let's say 6.2 and present value 8 point, let's say November 8.2. Then someone can ask, what is this base year value? Base year value may be 0. That zero is defined maybe in 2015, some cases 2010. Then that will be a real value. Okay. Whatever the thing in the economic terms, if you see a value called nominal value based on the current terms, real value is a value defined based on the reference year and adjusted with some weight. That's the definition of the nominal value and the real value. Okay. Then the interest rates, there are interest rates, floating interest rates. Yeah, there is one thing, GNP includes earning of our citizens in other countries. Yes, that's true. That is there. Okay. Interest rates, it could be a floating interest rate or fixed interest rate. Now, let's say if you want to go and get a housing loan from a bank, sometimes previously we prefer to go with the fixed interest rates. But now no one will give it as a fixed interest rate. They want to give the loan for a floating interest rate because bank also don't know what would be the impact on the near future. Therefore, they also want to give the floating interest rates. But there are two concepts, floating or fixed. Wait, okay, I want to go to the other slide. Okay, then when you want to learn the economics, there are some principles we have to learn. Everyone is talking about the balance of payment. To determine the balance of payment, before determine the balance of payment, you should understand there are some three main accounts our central bank maintains. One is called the current account, other one is called the capital account, third one is called the financial accounts. There are three accounts. I think in our accounting principles, we are having a current account, capital account. That means two sides. It's like current account means day-to-day activities. All the trade accounts. That means, let's say in a current account, if the imports are greater than exports, it's called a current account deficit. Then if the exports are greater than imports, it's called surplus. There are two items in the trade accounts. Import, exports are, you can easily quantify. There are invisible trade accounts also, services, tourism, remittances, interest, also under current account. Just see current account. There are two terms, surplus current account or deficit current account. In here, governments or country would prefer to have a surplus current account. That means surplus current account means we have more, let's say in simple terms, we have more income than the expenditure. That means export income is higher than the imports expenditure. Let's say if we can get more remittances, more foreign interest on maybe on our reserves in foreign countries, then we are getting interest. Then through the tourism, we are having income. Through providing services, we are having income. Then all the things also contribute positively. Then ultimately, if the current account having a surplus, that means whatever the income we are getting is higher than the expenditure. Okay, that's the one thing. Then other thing is the capital account. Here only we talk about the capital inflows and outflows. If the inflows are high, this is mainly called the foreign direct, maybe the direct investments. Then the capitals are higher, then we have a surplus account. Then if the outflows are high, we are having a deficit. Okay. Then the financial accounts, that the government borrowings and reserves. I think that's the main thing at the present situation. Now, what happened to our reserves? We don't have reserves at all. We are borrowing monies to different sources, maybe the government to government, or maybe the some Exim banks, maybe the higher interest rate loans, whatever the things, so many borrowings. Then what's the impact? If the borrowings are higher than the reserves, then it's a deficit. If the reserves are higher than the borrowings, then the surplus, then country having a surplus. Then this balance of payment is a measure of all the financial transactions flowing between one country and all other countries during a specific period. That means, we consider the Sri Lanka. Actually, balance of payment is the addition of all three accounts: current account, capital account, financial account. Then let's say if our current account having a deficit, capital account having a deficit, and financial account having a deficit, what would be the net impact? That means our balance of payment having a deficit. Now, actually at present, Sri Lankan economy, okay, due to the import restrictions, and I think government is telling our economy is booming, because that's just the explanation I can give it for that particular economic growth, because due to the import ban, our export income was higher than the, that's why they mention as the Q2 economic growth, but it's purely by restricting the imports. That's not the natural way due to the strict restriction during this situation. That's the one way government is controlling the current account balance. Now here, I think they are telling during this first 9 months, we have achieved more than $1 billion US dollars through the export income, and import expenditure. By restricting the import expenditure, our current account, visual trade account, because we didn't have much tourism, much remittances and services, okay, mainly through the exports, we had some surplus balance. And capital account, okay, there are no capital inflows, mainly the foreign direct investments and other things. We didn't have much inflows, but so many loan interest and other things for the capitals we had. That means capital, previously obtained capital, we have to pay the interest. That means so many outflows were there. Then outflows were more than inflows. Then there is a deficit on the capital account at present. Then financial account, there is a huge deficit because our borrowings were much greater than the reserves. Therefore, ultimately, Sri Lanka having a negative, it did, normally we not call it as negative, but deficit in the BOP. But ideal condition should be zero. That means current account, capital account, financial account. In the economic terms, there are some balancing items that whatever the items not included in these things, they will put it as balancing item. Don't forget about that. Current account, capital account, financial account. If it's surplus, that would be a preferred option. At least we should have zero, but we have a huge deficit. And you can see, I think these things you should understand somewhat. When we, because our next sessions, I will go through how to overcome this situation. Then you can see what are the strategies presently implemented by the government, and what are the impacts on these accounts. Okay, there's one question asked: what would be the worst thing that could happen if the government doesn't repay the foreign loans? I think that's a different thing. As soon as we doesn't repay the foreign loans, that will negatively impact on the country, and here we may not able to borrow any foreign exchange from any country. That means our reserves may be depleted, and if we unable to get the foreign exchange through the borrowings, definitely we will in a huge crisis. That means we may not able to buy at least the fuel to the country and the other essential items. So that means there will be a huge forex, that means foreign exchange deficit in the country. Only we can print money, but all whatever the things we print is in Sri Lankan rupees. But our economy mainly depend on the import items. That means fuel, mainly fuel, gas, whatever the essentials, we may not able to procure, purchase if we don't have the foreign currency. Now, as since we don't have the reserves, and if we not pay our commitments to the other financial institutions, then no one will give the foreign loans or the borrowings to our country. There will be a huge impact. That's why government tries to pay whatever the commitments for the capital outflows, at least the interest and the not the maybe the installment, but at least the interest to maintain that credibility of the country. Okay. I think with that, shall we conclude the today's session? Because please try to go through this verse, because in my next future slides, I will continuously use all these words. Okay. If you have any further questions, we can. I can answer in my knowledge. Okay, I am not the economist. That's the main thing, because I am also engineer, but I am interested on the economic principles. Shall we conclude it for today? If you need any further clarification or whatever the things, I think I have to do the next session on December 4th, Saturday. That's the scheduled date by the IESL. Again, I am doing health and safety and quality management on 30th. Okay. Then shall we conclude it today for today? Okay, thank you very much. Okay.